Athena always stood out to me as extra cool as a kid. Despite being a woman, she's a goddess of both wisdom and war, two things that were usually not associated with women back then. She is this, while also being the goddess of handicraft, and she is an extremely beautiful forever Volcel who came into this world fully clad in armor from Zeus's cracked skull. Yeah, I'm not kidding. The Athenians especially took a liking to her, as you might have guessed by the name, which is fitting because Athens is what we today consider where democracy originated, and also a bunch of famous thinkers. However, this is all a bit too good to be true, isn't it? She can't be this perfect. Surely she's nerfed in some way because otherwise she's too OP. And yeah, she is, because while she's a wise, beautiful, handy tactician, she's also kind of a major bitch. And I'm glad that as a child I was not exposed to the stories that reveal an incredibly toxic side of her. And that side is one that does not deal well with competition of any sort, whether it's wits, craft, or beauty. But before we talk about those stories, let's cover how she came to be, her birth. So basically there was this goddess Metis who was the wisest god of all. Although whether or not there was consent involved is debated, but Zeus and Metis copulated, which resulted in a pregnancy. Zeus, fearing that the child could overthrow him like he did with his father and his father did with his father, he swallowed the goddess whole while pregnant. After a while and several wives later, he would finally marry Hera, but then he got plagued with an intense headache. He then ordered to have his head cleaved to relieve the pain, and out came Athena, a fully grown armed woman clothed and clad in armor. Now, normally Hera would get angry about Zeus's bastard children, as they were living proof of Zeus's unfaithfulness, but because Athena technically was birthed from Zeus himself, she accepted Athena as her own. Athena didn't just become Athens' favorite without any work. She competed with Poseidon, the sea god himself, for this title, and it was decided by who gave the best gift. Poseidon, depending on where you get your info from, either gave them trade over water by striking the ground so that salt water sprouted up, or, as a different version says, he gave them the first horse. Athena, however, gave Athens the olive tree, providing them with oil, food, and wood. And thus, Athena won the title of patron goddess of Athens. Now, if you imagine Athena as this strong, independent woman who takes care of her fellow women as sisters, a feminist icon, unfortunately you're wrong. She is quite the opposite of that. And as you will soon learn, the tale of Medusa is very heartbreaking. Medusa wasn't always a snake-haired monster that turned people into stone. She used to be a beautiful maiden, and especially her hair was very pretty. Poseidon took a liking to her and forced himself on Medusa in the temple of Athena. This enraged the goddess, but instead of being angry with Poseidon for having taken Medusa's innocence by force, she punished Medusa by transforming her into the familiar serpent-haired creature. Yes, Athena punished Medusa for getting raped, and potentially being more beautiful than her. The hero Perseus would later slay Medusa by looking at her reflection in his shield, which Athena had given him, rather than look directly at her and be turned to stone. Medusa's story can be interpreted in many ways, from how her innocence was forcibly taken and thus she became a petrifying misandrous monster, to how incredibly beautiful women are almost petrifying to look at. Another myth tells the tale of how she was bathing naked in a spring with her friend the nymph Chariqlow. Chariqlow's son happened to see Athena naked, and so Athena did the only logical thing to do. She made him permanently blind, so he could never again see what he wasn't meant to see. Her friend Chariqlow begged Athena to restore his sight, but instead she gave him the ability to talk to birds and foretell the future. So at least she shows some mercy for her pals. She's still a bitch though. Now, maybe my favorite is the myth about Arachne. Like I said, Athena is the goddess of wisdom, war, and handiwork, which includes things like sewing and knitting and weaving. Arachne was Athena's weaving student, but the silly mortal made the mistake of being a bit too skilled and a bit too little humble about it. They ended up having a weaving contest to see who was better, after Arachne had boasted she was better than Athena herself. Athena's tapestry depicted her victory over Poseidon when they competed for Athens, as well as the Olympians fighting mythological creatures. In essence, she showed off the grandeur of the gods and the best side of them and their unwavering authority. Arachne, however, wove 21 episodes of the gods being assholes. She showed how Zeus had been unfaithful numerous times, dooming the lives of innocent mortal women. Her work was meant to showcase how the gods were unjust and abused mortals as they please. Athena showed off the gods' splendor, while Arachne dared showcase their faults. While Athena had to admit Arachne's work was flawless, the subject matter did not impress her, and she lost her temper, making her hit Arachne 4 times. Arachne ended up hanging herself, but Athena wouldn't let her off so easily. She brought her back in the form of a spider. The most well-known myth about Athena is probably the one about the Trojan War and the fair Helen. The goddess of chaos and discord, Eris, had made a golden apple that had inscribed, "For the fairest," which she gave to the goddesses. Hera, the goddess of marriage, Aphrodite, the goddess of love, and Athena, the goddess of wisdom, started arguing about who it was for, insisting they were all the most beautiful. They couldn't come to an agreement, so instead Zeus tasked the Trojan prince, Paris, to decide. Paris could not decide, as they were all equally beautiful, so instead it became a matter of who had the better bribe. Hera promised power over Eurasia, Athena promised fame and glory in battle, but Aphrodite promised him the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris, of course, went with the hot babe, which enraged Hera and Athena, who then sided with the Greeks in the Trojan War, and not on Paris' side. The rest of the story I will one day make a video of its own about Achilles and the Trojan War. For now, this was the basics of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, warfare, and handicrafts. Until next time, peace.